In UP Mindanao, you start from scratch. You're one of those who will put something into that canvas.
UP Mindanao is the catalyst of change in Mindanao. As a UP Mindanao student, the most important thing that I learned is to really see the bigger picture, while at the same time, you're not trying to ignore the smaller parts of the bigger picture.
It's really a place where I found myself. A lot of things have changed within me since I entered this university. I discovered a lot of my passions, things I'm interested about, things that I want to do. It was able to mold me into the person that I am today and shape my identity.
It's one of two constituent universities in Mindanao that is created by law. This came about because of the aspirations of the Mindanao constituents and the UP alumni to have a UP here in Mindanao.
A space for growth, for purpose, and potential that is deeply rooted in Mindanao. The students here don't take education for granted. Meron silang drive to do excellent work. And I love that heart.
Ang pagiging UP student ay hindi lamang nag-e-excel sa academic, but also sa larangan ng sports. Natutunan ko talaga sa pagiging student athlete yung discipline, respect, honor and excellence na binibigay ng UP sa amin. To know more about ourselves and to grow more as a person and as an athlete.
We have this mandate, this big responsibility to lead in education, in research, in public service, to respond to the local challenges and opportunities in Mindanao.
Q2 squared. Yes or no? All right. So now, why is it that we have to do this maths? Okay.
Well, one thing, sir, we need to practice and practice, even though magkamali.
Yeah. You have to persevere.
Try and try.
Oh, exactly, right? Exactly. We produce graduates that embody cool heads but warm hearts. We use scientific principles to be able to analyze problems, but warm hearts, we direct our efforts towards making sure that those that are marginal and disenfranchised are liberated. At the same time, they can learn.
Most of our professors are project heads and researchers, and they really provide us insights from those areas, specifically the far-flung areas here in Mindanao. Napapalalim yung understanding natin in terms of societal issues.
The School of Management equips its students to lead in the development of the agribusiness sector in Mindanao. So we are here to bring out the best in that sector through research, teaching and learning, and public service.
Being a Mindanaoan writer really shows you you're not doing this alone and you're not doing this for yourself. In the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, we cultivate critical thinking, creativity, and the dynamic understanding of what it means to be human.
Main contribution dyan ng department is to keep promoting anthropological thinking. Humanity is diverse. Itong diversity na ito should be seen as a source of strength.
Every day we are communicating, whether we like it or not. Communication is power. But more than that, there is mentoring. Not just for students, but there is mentoring within faculty members as well.
Akong gusto na ma-impart sa akong students is for them to develop their competencies that will allow them to work and promote sports and physical activity here in Mindanao.
We have been consistently excelling in the architecture licensure exam more than having the professional ID. At the end of the day, over and above that is to serve our community.
Dito naman sa CSM, we are a family. So there is no hindrance when it comes to collaboration. So we are open to that. I must say, I'm really proud of that. The research awards together with the students.
The discourse in terms of providing information and comments on a particular activity is very healthy, no? Napaka-nerd pa pakinggan pero mas nainganyo akong mag-aral. Kumaga pa, gano'n.
You know, Mindanao is really known for high biodiversity. For the biology program of the college, it's really an opportunity to live in harmony with the environment, to preserve the organisms that we are trying to protect in Mindanao.
We were given the international certification from the ASEAN University Network Quality Assurance, and it's the first BS Biology program to do so, and the department should be proud of that.
Can I hear everyone muna? Let's try the intro lang. 1, 2.
I would say Koro myself worked like an outlet for me while juggling my academics here. Parang goal namin as far as to sing Mindanao culture, and a satisfying thing, our org is focusing on culture and arts in Mindanao.
Very open ang organization sa magtanggap ng anyone, and at the same time is the members of the group nurture each other to become the best versions of themselves in that specific passion.
UP Mindanao is one of the institutions that saw also my potential as both creative and a professional. So I think there were some teachers, oy Errol, magsulat ka kasi you have the potential to write. Hindi lang siya yung just giving quality educations, but there is a bridge. Paano ilalapit yung edukasyon doon sa mga sectors ng Mindanao as an island?
There is a dire need for engineers in the country today. The quality of engineering here that we are trying to develop will not be less than the best that the UP system can offer. We are serious in bringing UP education to Mindanao.
A new chapter for UP Mindanao as we celebrate hopefully another 30 or 300 years.
UP Mindanao constantly rises to the complex demand of the society through innovation, resilience, and most of all, commitment to public service.
Serving all of these people here in Mindanao, because there's a lot of indigenous peoples all around the campus, is actually what makes our charter unique. We are supposed to serve Mindanaoans in service to our country.
We are really proud of what we're able to achieve with the achievements of also our students who have graduated from this university.
So when you enter the university, this is not just about academic excellence. You are here for a mission to give meaningful service to our community in Mindanao and for Mindanao.
On February 17, 2010, Republic Act 9996 was signed into law, establishing the Mindanao Development Authority as the government's lead agency for championing Mindanao sustainable development. "15 years on, Minda continues to coordinate and integrate development for Mindanao. Development that transcends political and geographical boundaries. reaching every island, every sector, every community.
MINDA was established to accelerate Mindanao's socioeconomic growth, ensuring that its vast resources, coupled with its strategic location, contribute to national development. Our mission is simply to integrate and coordinate development efforts, fostering inclusive growth for over 26 million Mindanaoans. We ensure that the national government's priorities are also aligned with the needs of the region, and we do this by partnering and listening to all our stakeholders here in Mindanao. It is a hard task, but it is one that we have accepted, so it's one that we're trying to do here in our region.
Of course, UP-NCPAG, especially my center, I head the Center for Policy and Executive Development. So we are very much a partner of MINDA in all these development efforts, not only in the area of capacity building. We conduct a lot of training programs for MINDA, but also we extend technical assistance in the preparation, for example, of the Mindanao Development Agenda, the Mindanao Transport Roadmap.
The role of MINDA here is really very, very important because there is no other agency that could really consolidate everybody here in Mindanao. It's only MINDA.
And of course, the MINDA, no? Kasi sila talaga yung nag-facilitate ng project nito. Dahil I'm very sure kung hindi dahil din sa support nila, hindi ito ma-realize. Kasi kumbaga, kailangan talaga namin ng partner na tutulong, magpa-facilitate ng like in our previous loan project, no? Siguro narinig mo yung solar irrigation. So, MINDA din ang nakatulong sa amin. And we were able to loan sa DBP because of them also, because of their help.
This year and beyond, we are strengthening our commitment to building a better Mindanao through strategic partnerships, inclusive programs, and a shared vision for lasting progress.
A better Mindanao is the one that the people are united, looking for a development, and a total development will come in Mindanao. Also, Better Mindanao is a cooperation and collaboration between the VARM and the MINDA. Without this cooperation of MINDA and VARM, I don't think that we can create a very good atmosphere for Mindanao.
You know, I think this is really about inclusivity. For the region to truly capitalize on its human potential and to really flourish, it's about inclusivity.
Different provinces has different strengths, we have different weaknesses, pero kung mag-collaborate tanan, makuha na to ang full potential sa Mindanao.
A better Mindanao is where, for example, there is this deadlock in the efforts to decommission our armed group. But this time, we are open. There's less threat, and we no longer entertain issues on security.
Together, we have written a new Mindanao story. Stories of peace, progress, and productivity. Together, we are building a better Mindanao.
collective effort kay dili maging siya in vain. And I hope Mindanao Pukon would be better in a sense every children is empowered, no child is left behind. We care about our environment, we strive to empower others, and we can beautifully live with one another, empowering one another.
Ang atong panlantaw pagyud sa umaabot nga kapanahunan nga ang Mindanao mamahimong malangkubon nga mudawat sa tanang klase sa tao nga naa ang kalambuan dinhi sa atong lugar na ang panaghiusa ug atong yung makabot o nakabot ang tinuod nga kalinaw dinhi sa Mindanao.
Sana po ay magkaroon kami ng mas malawak pa na avenue, for example, export. Also, kung meron kaming mas magandang facilities in terms of manufacturing, kasi nga medyo mabigat, at saka mahal po yung pagpagawa ng production, at saka ng mga certification. Pagka may day, ay may ganun kasi kami certification day, malawak po yung magiging market namin. Sana maparami pa yung mga manufacturer na kagaya namin, may certificates, kaya ng day and other certification na kailangan po para maka-export po kami or magkaroon ng malawak na market.
When I hear the phrase or the sentence, building a better Mindanao, I see a vision where the LGBTQ plus people, like the members of this community, are free to express who they are and they are given rights like to everything. Like di sila gina-judge and everyone is like educated about them. Like everyone accepts us for who we are.
Building a better Mindanao is about working together. It is the collective effort to strengthen partnerships among government, communities, businesses, donor organizations, and civil society to turn our shared dreams into reality. It embodies the aspirations, hopes, and potentials of every Mindanaoan. When we talk about building a better Mindanao, we are not only speaking of infrastructure, educational reforms, or socio-economic programs. We are talking about unity, resilience, and opportunity in lifting families out of poverty, empowering our youth, protecting our environment, and sustaining the peace that we have all worked so hard to achieve. Together, we can build the Mindanao that our people deserve, one that is strong, inclusive, and forward-looking. As President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. aptly puts it, ang kinabukasan ng Mindanao ay kinabukasan ng bansa.
The world is in a constant state of change now more than ever. It's a world that requires resilience, flexibility, and innovation to overcome challenges and to pursue growth. That is why the University of the Philippines Los Baños is pursuing future-proofing initiatives to provide agile leadership and develop local and global communities amidst shocks and disruptions in an ever-changing world. Guided by compassion, an openness to working together, and a daring to seek out breakthroughs, UPLB constantly pushes for academic excellence, produces relevant research, establishes academic and industry partnerships, and cultivates creativity, critical thinking, and innovation. To keep up with the fast-changing world and to strive for inclusivity in development, UPLB seeks to level the playing field and expand avenues for acquiring new knowledge. It is reshaping the learning experience, enabling students and educators to continue with the learning process in vastly different learning conditions. It is expanding its academic programs and supporting initiatives to create a conducive learning environment. To address the growing complexities of modern problems, UPLB continues to break barriers across disciplines to produce cutting-edge innovations and solutions that serve the needs of various communities. It is taking on challenges in food security and sustainability and coordinating research efforts to direct the university's resources toward critical research areas, making sure that the university-generated knowledge can reach its intended stakeholders and be applied to real-life contexts. UPLB is dedicated to its commitment to contribute to public good and social welfare as it continues to work with the local government and the community to address their most pressing needs. Amidst its engagements, UPLB remains as one of the top regional and global universities and continues to be recognized in the country and across the world. As the national university, UPLB aims to be a steadfast partner in development as a producer of new approaches that minimize the cost and impacts of future shocks, and by honing leaders committed to knowledge creation, innovation, and cutting-edge research and public service. This is UPLB's roadmap to be an impactful institution in a constantly changing landscape. Responsive, innovative, future-proof.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So let us begin the program by singing the Philippine National Anthem.
Kalap ng puso, tanit mo'y buhay. Lupang hininang, guyang ka ng magitik, naman tulugin, dito ka
All right. So once again, good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time and joining us in this webinar entitled Invisible Hands, the Unseen Work Behind AANR. I am Therese Gilnat, University Researcher and DeepLab staff, and I am honored to be your host this afternoon. So as you know, this activity is very relevant as we are celebrating Women's Month. And today, we will focus on the unseen work of families and women that sustain the agriculture, aquatic, and natural resources, or the AANR sector. So join us as we shed light on these invisible hands and discuss the gender gaps that shape the sector. So this webinar is organized by the Development Innovations and Policy Laboratory, or DIPLAB, of the UP Los Baños College of Public Affairs and Development. This is in partnership with the UP Mindanao Gender and Development Laboratory, or GADLab in ANR, and the Mindanao Development Authority, or MINDA. So now, before we officially begin, we would like to invite the DIPLAB Phase 2 project leader, Dr. Maria Luz Malabayabas, to deliver her welcome remarks.
Thank you, Ted. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, The Invisible Hands and Unseen Labor in Agriculture and Aquatic and Natural Resources, or ANR. This Women's Month, together with the Deep Lab and the Gender and Development Laboratory of UP Mindanao and the Mindanao Development Authority, or MINDA, brings attention to the reality that's often neglected or overlooked, which is deeply embedded in our household, communities, and even in production system. And that's the invisible labor performed by women. In many conversation, when someone introduces herself, I'm a full-time housewife or a mother, well, they often say housewife lang, and there's a lang word at the end, which means small or something secondary. Yet, we pause to examine that daily work behind the role, like managing the household with limited resources, caring for the children and the elders, much more in the rural communities where they're still participating in the farming labor. We begin to see a different picture. And if ever, if we assign this value to this labor, like the unpaid labor, we can say that the housewife may be the major provider of the household, because because of the time that they allot doing the unpaid labor. Well, in today's discussion, I'm inviting everyone to rethink how we define work, productivity, and contribution to the ANR sector. Well, it's challenges to make the invisible visible, and to recognize the unpaid and care work as part of our development narrative. As we celebrate Women's Month, may this webinar serve not only as a platform for dialogue, but also as a step toward more inclusive governance where every form of labor is acknowledged, valued, and supported. Again, thank you, everyone, and we wish everyone a meaningful and engaging discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malabayabas. Now, to give us a message of support, please welcome Ms. Melissa F. Abeleda, the officer in charge of the Socioeconomic Research Division of the OSTP card.
Thank you, Mr. Rees. Good afternoon, everyone. Our organizers, the Deep Lab, GADLab in ANR, and Mindanao Development Authority. Our guest speakers, Dr. Gomati Palanyapan, USEC Janet Lopos, and Dr. Telma Paris. Reactors, Dr. Mansour Limba, Ms. Princess Annie, Dr. Adrian Tamayo, and Attorney Charmaine Valentin. And all the participants, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. On behalf of the Philippine Council for Agriculture, Aquatic, and Natural Resources Research and Development, particularly through the Socioeconomics Research Division, it is a pleasure to join you in this very meaningful webinar, Invisible Hands, the Unseen Work Behind ANR. This topic resonates strongly with us. In the agriculture, aquatic, and natural resources sector, Much of the work that sustains our food systems and rural economies often remains unseen. And this is especially true for the contributions of women and families. Based on our gender analysis of selected commodities in the AANR sector, women and children often face time poverty, multiple burdens, carrying heavy workloads while remaining underrepresented in decision making and policies. These invisible hands are not just supporting actors, they are central to production, processing, marketing, and community resilience. Yet their roles are often underrepresented or underrecognized in research, policy, and development programs. This is why conversations like this are very important. We are proud to share that Picard, through CERD, has supported the establishment of both the Deep Lab and the GAD Lab in ANR. These platforms were envisioned to strengthen evidence-based policy, inclusive innovation, and gender-responsive research in the sector. It is encouraging to see these initiatives now coming together to bring this important discussion to a wider audience. Today's webinar is an opportunity not only to recognize these invisible contributions, but also to reflect on how we can make them more visible in the way we design our research, shape our policies, and implement our programs. Importantly, today's webinar is not just a standalone event. It also serves as a pre-event to the upcoming Policy Hackathon of the same team. This means that the ideas, insights, and discussions we generate today will directly inform more concrete, solution-oriented policy innovations in the next phase. In a way, this is where reflection meets action. We hope that this session will spark meaningful insights and inspire actions toward a more inclusive and gender-responsive ANR sector. Thank you, everyone, and may we have an insightful and collaborative discussion in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abeleda. Of course, we'd also like to hear from Dr. Marilu O. Montiflor, the Director of the Office of Research at UP Mindanao, for a short message. So please watch this video for her message.
Good morning, everyone. Last week, I talked about empowering women leaders in producer organizations with focus on our coffee case study in Sultan Kudarat. I shared that despite clear benefits of the organizational leadership for women, several barriers persist. One, or first, is an overburden risk arises when women assume leadership roles while men do not share household or organizational duties, creating an unfair workload. Second, sociocultural barriers remain. In many regions, women still need their husband's approval to attend meetings and must manage double duties such as bringing children to training sessions. Third is entrenched gender norms. Keep leadership male dominated as traditional views continue to portray men as the primary decision makers. This morning, I am happy that we are supporting another webinar for women. And as the rural families increasingly depend on off-farm earnings, women are expected to sustain day-to-day operations. That unpaid and underrecognized labor piles up into long, exhausting workdays, deepening gender gaps in income, time use, and decision making. Addressing these invisible burdens is essential to achieving fairer, more productive rural economies. I congratulate the Development Innovations in Policy Laboratory or DIPLAB of VPLB, the GAD Lab in AANR of the UP Mindanao and the Mindanao Development Authority for organizing this webinar. We hope that we continue to support webinars such as this so that we will not only discuss and study women as being invisible, but we proceed to call for action with the translation of this research to data-driven policies. Through these initiatives, the unseen work of women will be recognized and valued. So we hope that you will enjoy and participate in this discussion for this morning. So maayong buntag sa tanan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Montiflor. So right now we'll just have a very quick photo opportunity. So to our panelists here at Zoom, can we turn on your cameras so that we can take a quick picture? Thank you. Okay. Is everyone ready? Okay. Yusek, Janet, are you going to open for your cam? Okay. Okay, that in 1, 2, 3. One more? Okay. One more. Okay. 1, 2, 3. I think okay na po. Thank you very much po to everyone. Okay, so now for the session we are all looking forward to. So just a quick reminder to our viewers on YouTube and on Zoom, you may type in your questions in the chat box or comment section later. And we will try to include them during the open forum. So now, without further ado, we are privileged to have with us 3 speakers for this session. So there is some bit of a change po with regards to the order of our speakers. So if it's okay, can we have the first speaker? So let me introduce her first. She is the executive director and the chair of the GAD Focal Point System of the Mindanao Development Authority, or MINDA, where she provides strategic leadership in pursuing broad initiatives that seek to address both challenges and opportunities in terms of harnessing Mindanao's inherently rich socioeconomic potentials while pursuing ecological integration. Appointed with the rank of Undersecretary and Career Executive Service Officer 1 eligibility, she provides strategic leadership in development planning, policy advocacy, investment promotion, and international relations. Concurrently, she serves as board secretary to the MINDA Board of Directors, head of the Philippine National Coordinating Office for BIMP EAGA, head of the Secretariat to the Mindanao Lawmakers Association, and the Confederation of Mindanao Governors and Mayors. With advanced degrees in economics, business and organizational development, and international training in strategic management, she oversees a team of over 100 professionals driving socioeconomic growth and ecological integration across Mindanao. So let us all give a hand to Yusek Janet Lopez. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Okay. So, maayong hapon sa tanan. Good afternoon po sa lahat. First, we'd like to thank you for allowing Minda to have this space to also share our thoughts on the invisible hand, the unseen work behind agriculture, aquaculture, and natural resources. So to our distinguished members of the team, the organizers, to our guests, to all the scholars and advocates present in this room, to the farmers and fisher folks whose labor made it possible for all of us to eat breakfast today and lunch. Maayong hapon kanatong tanan. I want to begin with a question which we will all answer by remembering. Think of the last time you were in a farm, a fish pond, or a forest. Or perhaps you were just in a kitchen in a small house in the middle of Mindanao at 4 a.m. Think of who was already awake. Think of whose hands were already moving, sorting, preparing, mending, carrying. Sino yung abala na, punong abala at 4 a.m. And think of who finished last and still set the table for others. If you are thinking of a woman, you are thinking correctly. And that is exactly what we are here to talk about. But just a few minutes ago, while I was reviewing my slides, my presentation, I decided that I needed to add something that was not in my original PowerPoint, but because something has changed dramatically over the last few days or weeks probably, and we know that when the world changes, our policy conversations must also change with it. Allow me first to talk about the hand that feeds the unnamed. The invisible hand in classical economics refer to the self-regulating mechanisms of the market. The idea that individual self-interest, when aggregated, produces collective good. And this is what Adam Smith meant. It was supposed to be a metaphor for market forces. Maalala ko when we were discussing this in class. I'm also an economics graduate, so this is very common word in our lectures on economics, the invisible hand. And it was usually used to refer to how the market operates, the supply and demand, etc. But today, this afternoon, I allow me to use the phrase in a different sense. The invisible hand I am speaking of is no longer about the market forces, supply and demand. But this invisible hand terminology now belongs to a specific person. She wakes up before sunrise. She wades into the fish pond, or she tends to the vegetable plot. She carries produce to the market and returns home to prepare for lunch or to prepare for food for the family. And she's the one who keeps the account of the household economy, and in her head, memorize niya yan. Not on paper, not on any formal ledgers that will be referenced in policy briefs later on, but she does things in her head. She negotiates with buyers, she borrows, she lends, she talks to neighbors, to suppliers, to customers, but she does all the work while being classified in many of our formal or official records as not employed or unpaid family worker. Her hand moves the entire architecture of rural life in Mindanao, but in our statistics, she remains to be invisible. And that being invisible is not really accidental. It is structural. It is the product of how we define work, how we measure contribution. And let us be honest this time. That is also the way we design policy. The invisibility of women in our accounts is not accidental, it is structural even in our design policy. What the data tells us. Let us look at the numbers because numbers matter in a policy forum. In Mindanao, the agriculture, aquaculture, and natural resources sector employs a significant portion of the labor force. It is the backbone of regional food security, export revenue, and rural livelihood. And yet, within that sector, there is a profound gender imbalance in how work is seen, compensated, and even counted for. Women contribute substantially to farm and fishery productivity, performing tasks classified as support functions, seedling preparation, sorting, what else bang ginagawa? Handling, market vending, record keeping. These are not peripheral activities. They are central to the value chain. But because they are performed within the household or in coordination with male family members who are considered to be the main economic actors, they are systematically undercounted. The gender wage gap in agricultural labor in the Philippines is also well documented, and many researchers point to that fact that women earn significantly less than men for comparable work. Women have lower rates of land titling and formal ownership. Women are underrepresented in agricultural cooperatives, credit access, and extension services. And this is not only a women's issue. When we fail to see and support women's labor in this sector, we weaken the entire system. We lose efficiency. We lose the very engine that keeps family farms operational across Mindanao. Now, the family labor paradox. In Philippine culture and Mindanao culture, there is no exception, even in us here in Mindanao. Family is sacred. The concept of damayan, of shared labor and shared sacrifice, is deeply embedded in how rural communities survive. In many ways, this is good. It is relational in ways that market economies fail to capture or replicate. But it is this same cultural framework that can become the mechanism through which women's labor is rendered invisible and unrewarded. Because it is family labor, it is assumed to be willing. Because it is done out of love and duty, ayan na naman tayo, no? Your concept natin of love and duty, many of us believe that when we do something done out of love, it is supposed to be given freely without expecting anything in return. And so it is assumed that it requires no compensation. And because it is embedded in the household, it is born out of duty, born out of love, born out of expected roles, no? It is assumed to be the natural order of things, and therefore there is no compensation, and therefore it is something that should not be um, recorded or accounted for. And what does this mean in practice? Women do more hours of combined paid and unpaid work than men in agricultural households. 'Di ba? Nagtatrabaho siya sa agricultural sector, nagtatrabaho siya sa farm, tumutulong naman siya dun sa labor sa labas. Pero pagdating niya sa bahay, uh, they also do much of the work in the household. And yet they are not counted among the employed. And they carry higher levels of financial vulnerability. This is not a criticism of Filipino family values, by the way. And we honor women doing a lot of labor out of love. I am also a member of the Healing Missionaries of the Holy Spirit community, and we do counseling for families, for women, for mothers, for daughters, no? And I often encounter this kind of concern. Women, daughters being overworked, overloaded, getting too tired because it is part of the family system that we work outside, but also in the household, we're expected to do all the work as well. So it is a call to align our policies with what our families actually look like and with the full contribution of every member within them. So let me move to my next. No, what happened during the Middle East crisis and Mindanao's agriculture AANR sector para mas direct, mas simple. So that's just the intro. Nasa intro pa pala ako. Now let me move to the crisis and how this is affecting agriculture, AANR, and the Mindanao in particular. On February 28th, we all know that the world woke up with loud airstrikes that triggered a crisis in the Middle East that has since reshaped global energy markets. It disrupted critical shipping lanes, placed the Philippine economy under acute pressure. The Strait of Hormuz, paano ba pronounce yan? The Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas passes, was effectively choked. Vessel traffic through the critical waterway plummeted from an average of 90 ships yung dating dumadaan dyan every day to as few as only 4 ships traveling in that pathway. So on some days, it reached even to zero. And this is not simply just a geopolitical event. The long-term consequences will surely be felt. Mararamdaman natin ng ating mga kababaihan at the farm gate, at the fish landing site, in the kitchen of every agricultural household in Mindanao. So while we're looking at the news on what's happening in the Middle East, let me be specific about what is happening and what it means for the women who hold the AANR sector altogether. Let us first look at the issue on the crude oil prices that have surged to nearly $115 per barrel as of mid-March 2026. This is increase of 59% from before the Middle East crisis started. No, the per barrel was only like $72, but right now it has reached even to 113 a few days ago and to 115 per barrel recently. Domestic diesel has crossed dito sa atin sa Pilipinas sa Mindanao 100 pesos per liter threshold. These are not numbers on screen. They are the cost of hauling vegetables to markets, the cost of powering fishing boats, and of running irrigation pumps on farms across Mindanao. So kahit saan yan, mararamdaman yan. Hindi lang yan nasa TV, nasa news. Ramdam na ramdam natin yan. Even at to this day, to the very hour that we are speaking. Fertilizer costs are compounding the problem. The Gulf region produces roughly half of the world's urea and nitrogen fertilizers. So the disruption in that area have stalled movement of about 3 to 4 million metric tons of fertilizers moving globally. Urea prices have surged to $482 per ton. Bago pa man nagkaroon ng conflict, $482 yan. Ngayon, umaabot na pumapalo sa $720 dollars. And that's about 50% increase. Not in months, in less than weeks. So, anong sinasabi natin dito? For Mindanao farmers, many of whom are dependent on or operating on already thin margins, this is potentially catastrophic. For them, higher input cost means lower net incomes. Lower net incomes mean households cut back on food, magtitipid sa medisina, sa pag-aaral, sa ibang gagastusin. And who manages those household cuts? Sino ba ang nagmamanage ng budget pag umiiksi? Who stretches the budgets, keeps her own meals? It's usually the women. Always the woman. Kaya hindi lang siya Middle East crisis. It is actually a catastrophe looming to happen to women in the households and in the AANR sector. Tingnan naman natin isang example ng industry na napakarami ng ating women in the employment, no, dun sa ating banana industry. The banana industry is a major employer across Mindanao, lalo-lalo na sa Davao Region, Soc-Sargent, Caraga, and a significant share of the labor force in the banana industry is actually women. Lumabas ito sa ginawa namin na research together with the World Bank. And the war has placed our banana industry in an immediate risk. Tinatansya natin na siguro mga around 200 million approximately, no? Approximately or 12 billion potential losses in the banana export revenues due to trade disruptions in the Middle East. Kasi nga Philippine bananas, we export our Philippine bananas to Iran. And Iran had become one of the most lucrative non-Asian export destination natin. And most of the banana exports of the country are actually coming from Mindanao. So when export revenue collapsed, ang pinakaunang-unang natatanggal, no, are seasonal laborers, and many are women. They are the last to be hired, but they are the first to be released pag merong mga crisis sa industry. Silang unang-unang natatanggal. So that's a demonstration of how we are affected in an industry level experience. Tingnan naman natin yung mga remittances. That's another dimension of the potential impact of the crisis to our women and to the AANR sector. OFW remittances are a critical income supplement for our households, especially households in the agriculture and the rural sector, which are mostly managed by women. No? Ang Pilipinas ay nagpapadala ng 2.5 million Filipinos in the Middle East as early as 2026. At karamihan nito, maraming portion nito is really coming from Mindanao. The current conflict puts an estimated 6.5 billion in annual remittance inflow sa atin, sa Pilipinas. Karamihan naman nito sa ating mga probinsya. Alam natin, this is our primary life support system for families. Ito yung nagfi-finance ng pambili ng fertilizer, pambili natin ng mga seedlings, pang-finance ng education ng mga bata, tuition, hospital bills, farm inputs, etc. So, in Mindanao's rural agricultural household, remittance income bridges the gap between farm produce and what the family needs in order to survive. At sino nga ba ang nagmamanage ng mga remittance income ng mga household in the rural province, in the rural households? Hindi ba ang kababaihan din? Sino ba ang nagde-decide? Sino na si stress kapag wala nang pumapasok ng mga padala mula sa abroad? Hindi ba ang kababaihan ng mga nanay? No? So, what does the global crisis really mean in specific life to a woman in the agriculture household in Mindanao? Para sa kanya, ang krisis na ito ay presyo ng gasolina, fuel cost for getting the market, it has doubled already. It means her husband's fertilizer bill has spiked to 50% more. It means na remittance galing sa kaibigan, sa kamag-anak ay kumukonti lalo. So marami siyang stress no sa kanyang pagbabudget niyan sa araw-araw. So that's the shape, the face of a woman in the agriculture, natural resource sector pagdating sa mga krisis na ganito. Ngayon tingnan naman natin ang governance natin. Let's shift our gaze into the governance that maybe has failed to see all of these realities. Let us speak plainly about it. For decades, our agriculture policies have been designed around the image of the male farmer, the land title holder, the registered cooperative member, the recipient of extension services. Siya yun. The image has been the template for many of our interventions. And because women in the sector rarely fit into that template, they are largely excluded from the benefits of agricultural development programs, for cooperative interventions. And when we design support services around formal employment, women usually are not accounted for. When we design land reform programs around individual male title holders, women become invisible. When we design credit programs, cooperative credit programs that require collateral and formal documentation, women again become invisible in many ways. So over time, minsan hindi lang na ito na namamalayan, nagiging practice lang, oversight lang. But this oversight over time compound into structural disadvantage that is passed on from lola to nanay and nanay to daughters, passed on from generations to generations, and then it becomes structural. No? Maybe consciously or unconsciously, but this time in our policy reviews, we need to be mindful, we need to be intentional, we need to be more mindful of this seemingly unnoticed practices. Now let me move to the Mindanao imperative. Because of this governance disconnect from the policy to our lived reality, we need to look into our imperatives here in Mindanao. You know, Mindanao is not a monolith. It is a region of extraordinary diversity, linguistic, cultural, religious, ecological, etc., etc. No? So, if, for example, yung experience ng ating Magindanaon woman in the farm is not the same as the experience naman of our Blaan women in South Cotabato, or an experience of our Marana women in the lakeshore communities of Lanao del Sur, or yung ating Cebuana woman in the highland farms of Bukidnon, no? Or ng ating indigenous communities. Iba-iba ang ating system of land stewardship, labor division, and resource governance system. At ito yung diversity na sana ay i-capture din ng ating policies that often fail to engage with this diversity appropriately. Natingnan natin, ano ba yung kailangan natin sa ating policy work that we are going to do now in the coming days. Let me offer 6 policy directions na sana ay makapture natin in the ensuing deliberations and conversations. First, let us revise how we count. our data system must continue reforms. No? Alam ko inuumpisahan na natin it ngayon in many fronts, even in the academe, lalong-lalo na. But let us continue the reforms to capture women's actual contribution to agricultural labor, including unpaid family labor, part-time and seasonal work, and household-based post-harvest activities. Kasi without accurate data, we cannot really make accurate policies and accurate recommendations as well. Pangalawa, let us redesign access criteria. Even yung ating land titling, credit programs, cooperative membership, extension services, sana gawing mas explicit, no? Na iba yung talagang may bilang yung individual beneficiaries na women. Para hindi lang sila dependents of male household heads. Hindi lang sila dependent ni husband. Hindi lang sila dependents ni tatay. Sana meron din talagang individual beneficiaries. Third, we need to invest in women's economic infrastructure. So storage facilities, market access, financial literacy, legal aid, land property rights. Sana design talaga for women in the AANR sector. Pang-apat, we have to build gender-responsive institutions. So agencies such as DA, BFAR, DNR, and local government partners must have functional GAD programs with actual accountability mechanisms specifically for the AANR sector women. Pang-apat, and this is the crisis response dimension na. Let's include women explicitly in emergency AANR interventions. Sa example, yung fuel subsidy for farmers, yung fertilizer procurement alternatives. Sana ma-explore na meron talagang explicitly for women. Pang-anim, and finally, let us listen to women in this sector. Hindi lang sila passive recipients of policy. In times of crisis like this, they are often the fastest adapters and the most resourceful responders. And governance that excludes their voice in design and evaluation will continue to produce programs that miss the mark. So finally, in closing, let me end by saying that in Mindanao AANR sector, the women who hold this system together will carry more of that burden than anyone else. So there is a concept in development studies called counting what counts. It is the recognition that what we measure shapes what we value, and what we value shapes how we govern. So to the women who are here today, I want to say something directly. Your work, our work, is real. It is essential. The purpose of this roadshow, of this GAD program, of every policy we will discuss in the days ahead or even today, is to make sure the systems catch up to what our communities have always known. That women, that you, that we hold this sector together. We are not simply doing this for you, for all the women in this sector. We are doing this together with you. And we commit, on behalf of the Mindanao Development Authority, to returning with better programs, better data, better researches, better budgets, and better means and platforms to listen, to make you count, to make women in AANR sector count. I believe we are here today because we have chosen to be visible. We have chosen, we have intentionally decided to be visible. And I am with you, hopeful. Maraming salamat. Diyos ang magtabang kanato tanan. Maayong hapon sa tanan.
Thank you very much, Yusek Lopez, for that very insightful and beautiful discussion. We'll definitely remember counting what counts. And that is important to align our policies to what is really happening in our reality in our home. So thank you very much once again. Let's give her a warm round of applause once again. Thank you very much, Yusek Lopez. Okay, now, without further ado, let me introduce our second speaker. She is an agricultural social scientist with nearly 3 decades of experience leading ACR-funded programs on community behavior change across Asia and the Pacific. Currently, a senior research fellow of rural development at the University of Queensland's School of Agriculture and Food Sustainability, she specializes in agricultural research, innovation adoption, gender and social inclusion, socioeconomic research, and sustainable development. She is also a chief investigator and provides mentorship to research students from across disciplines, including social sciences, agricultural extension, and veterinary science. She also holds an adjunct professorship at the Visayas State University. Let us all welcome Dr. Gumati Palanapian. Welcome, Dr. Gumati.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank all the organizers and the presenters. This is a fantastic opportunity and a very timely topic that we are discussing on strategies for recognizing and valuing women's contribution in the AANR sector, which is agriculture, aquatic, and natural resource systems. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm looking at this a bit more broadly, which will look at the global level. So this invisibility is not just specific to any country, but you could see at the global level. And also, if you look at the data at the global level presented on the slide here, it's not updated. A lot of data from the countries are missing, which also includes Philippines. So this is the opportunity for us to emphasize that this kind of disaggregated data is important and critical to be included. So in this slide, where we are talking about the cause of invisibility, the first aspect that I would like to discuss is the proportion of time which is spent on the unpaid and the domestic and care work, which was mentioned by the earlier speaker and was emphasized in all the other introductory speeches, where the women on the left-hand side, which is a kind of more brownish yellow, is where the data of the women's unpaid work, which is 12 to 24% for the 24-hour day, versus the men, which is 3 to 12%. Now, when we say that the percentage of difference between the women and men, this is more a global data, so this is not very specific just to the women farmers, but it's in general, which gives us a glimpse of an idea of how this differentiation will impact the women's representation when it comes to paid work. So it actually talks about the unequal distribution of the unpaid domestic and care work, where you can see women spending, which is 12 to 24%, which is about nearly 3 to 6 hours per day. And in contrast, where you can see where the men is 3 to 12%, which is approximately 40 minutes to 3 hours per day. So we're not doing here the women versus men, but what we are saying here is how the institution has structured in a way where the women's unpaid work is always on a daily basis is quite higher. So this stark time gap significantly constrains women's ability to engage in the paid and the productive and the more visible work that's been defined a lot globally based on the United Nations data. Even when women participate actively in farming and their overall time availability is reduced by continuous demands of the caregiving, the household management, and the other unpaid tasks. So as a result, you could see that women are more likely to be perceived as less economically active, which was also mentioned by our previous speaker. It's immediately defined as women are not economically active or less committed to economically beneficial activities, or this is an opportunity where we need to redefine work. The imbalance in the unpaid care work reinforces women's statistical and institutional invisibility, as many of the agriculture surveys and the extension services and the productivity measures, they focus primarily on the paid labor only, and only the field-based activities which is more visible. So by absorbing a disproportionate share of the unpaid work, women face these structural barriers to access, of course, trainings, the leadership, and the technology. And very, very cautiously, any interventions has to be carefully thought, because that would be an additional burden to the women's time and the contribution that they can do in any of those activities. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So moving ahead, as you could see, now we are talking about employment rate. So this is again a representation of how women participate, and it's a comparison data between women and the men. So women and men between the age group of 25 and 54 by the age of the youngest dependent child, which is the graph A. And then the graph B is about the number of children. So when this variable is included in the analysis, you could say, as starting with the graph A, when there are no young children or when the youngest child is older, the employment rates of men remain consistently high, which is typically around 90 to 95%, regardless of the family situation. However, the women's employment rate, changes sharply with the age of the youngest child. When the younger child is under 3 years old, women's employment drops significantly, often to around 55 to 65% when compared to the men, which was around 90%. As the child gets older, women's employment gradually increases, reaching to about 70 to 80% once the youngest child is school-aged. Even then, the gender gap is around 10 to 15%, which is something that needs to be considered. So the childcare responsibilities disproportionately reduces women's participation in the paid work. The work is defined in that way. Now looking at graph B, when you talk about the number of dependent children, the graph B again reinforces the pattern. When you look at the number of dependent children, men's employment rates again remain to be stable, which is close to 90%, whether they have one child or several children, there's no change. For women, the employment declines steadily as the number of children increases. So with one child, the women's employment may be around 75 to 80%. With 2 children, it falls further down to 65 to 70. With 3 or more, it can drop below. This shows that it's not motherhood alone, but the intensity of caregiving that constrains women's engagement in the paid work. Now, this is the average data of 38 countries that span from the North America, South America, Europe, and also including Asia Pacific. Again, there is lack of data in many, many countries, yet it's not been included. So this is a critical time that we keep on re-emphasizing that this kind of information being valued and the data be gathered as researchers. Can you please move on to the next slide? Okay, so further to, again, reinforcing. So this is the data from the Philippines. And the survey was conducted in 2021. So there's not, I couldn't find any recent information yet, but they could be available around other sources. So there's two graphs here. The slide shows that while men and women may spend similar total hours working, the composition of work differs sharply. Men's time is concentrated in paid work, whereas women spend substantially more time in the unpaid non-work activities, which is particularly the care work. So women consistently shoulder longer hours of care responsibilities, including child care. The care can be, defined, like it could be child care or the elderly care or the, taking care of the sick people. As a result, even when women participate in paid work, their total workload often exceeds that of men, which is, again, something to consider about the double burden and the triple burden that we are now discussing in research. So the time spent in hours shows that by adult women and men, the care activities per day. So women participants dominated all the care activities, as you could see in the graph. And when you think about paid work, women spend 5 hours per day in paid work, while men spend 7 hours per day, indicating men engaging more in the income-generating activities. When you talk about non-work, so women have about 14 hours per day in non-work compared to men, and suggesting that men have slightly more time outside of work responsibilities. Women's total work time is 9 hours per day, whereas men is 8 hours per day, showing that women carry a higher overall workload when unpaid care was included. So, despite spending fewer hours in paid work, women's higher total workload is always higher. And this data still reinforces and establishes that. Can you move on to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so I would like to acknowledge here, this is a screenshot of the data from the project titled Development of Gender Responsive Knowledge Transfer Pathway for Potential Adoption of Best Practices in the Philippine Vegetable Production System. This project was run between 2022 and finished in May 15, 2025. This project was funded by PICARD and is a project, it was a subcomponent of an Australian Centre for International Agriculture, ACIR funded project on the program called Soils and Land Management. So this project was, of course, in 3 locations. So one representing, one of the institutions was, of course, University of Philippines, Los Baños. And then there was UPSTP in Claveria, and then there was Visayas State University in Leyte. So a screenshot of the data is showing how the time block is spent by the farmers, specifically in Leyte, where you can see that the activity profile. So the activity profile shows that both women and men are actively involved across multiple stages of vegetable production, but the roles are not equally recognized or valued. Men are more visible in activities traditionally classified as productive and technical, such as land preparation, spraying, and input application. These activities are often recognized as farmer tasks and are more likely to be captured in the agriculture statistics or considered for the extension system for knowledge or information delivery. Women, on the other hand, are considered as a support system, or when, of course, there's been research conducted by one of my PhD students, who is also in this panel, Ms. Princess. When she was interviewing women, women don't consider themselves as farmers. So the institution has structured them in a way that they themselves think that they are part of the support system and not necessarily the farmers. So although they provide a substantial contribution in the labor-intensive, also time-consuming tasks, including seedling preparation, transplanting, weeding, harvesting, post-harvest handling, and sometimes marketing, many times in marketing. While these activities are critical for crop success and quality, they are frequently viewed as assistance or household support rather than the skilled agriculture worker. So where is the recognition? Where is the recognition for all the contribution that they have made? So importantly, many of these productive tasks performed by women are carried out alongside or unpaid domestic and care responsibilities, increasing women's overall workload. So this reinforces the pattern of invisibility, where women contribute significantly to farm productivity, but remain underrepresented in many of the domains for which we are now discussing this in this webinar. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a bit more global data here. So a common root cause of women's invisibility in agriculture and natural resource systems is who is officially recognized as a farmer or producer. I've aligned this more to the topic of agriculture, but I'm sure this is the same context when it comes to aquaculture and any natural resource system. In many contexts, the recognition is tied to ownership. So either it's ownership of land or ownership of boat in the context of the fisheries, or the ownership of or access to the water resources. So the household headship rather than to actual labor contribution. This has profound gender implication. I do recall right from the very early days where many of our speakers might agree that if you look at the literature back home when you talk about gender, it was focusing very, very specifically about land ownership. There was two aspects which was, in the very olden reports, if you look at before agency and decision-making came, the more importance of the ownership of land and access to finance. They were very much emphasized because these two are connected and gives that breakthrough for the women in the institutional structure to call themselves as farmers. So the data here is a measure of the proportion of men aged 15 to 49 who are the sole owners of land, meaning the land is legally registered in their name or cannot be sold without their approval. Importantly, this measure excludes land held jointly, which is where many women's claims to land are concentrated. Sole land ownership provides not only economic security, but also decision-making power and social influence within the household communities. So now talking about Philippines, in the Philippines, the implication of this ownership-based definition of who counts as a farmer is particularly at a stark. Between 2000 and 2015, the data from the Philippine Statistic Authority showed that women comprise only about 33% of the beneficiaries of emancipation patents and certificates of land ownership agreements. This persistent gap reveals deeper systematic barriers, including cultural norms, inheritance practices, and institutional bias that limit women's access to land despite their substantial involvement in agricultural production. Can we move to the next slide, please? So in this slide, what I would like to emphasize here is the decision-making and who performs these activities. And this is again representing later. So the results indicate that men overwhelmingly have more decision-making power. And so when you categorize men only or men mostly, we could see that in the pest and disease management, it's significantly higher with 87%, and fertilizer application, which is 86%, weeding is 81%, and adoption of agriculture technologies, which is 71%. These high percentages clearly demonstrate that men hold the primary authority over the critical farm management and also the decisions. And these are also the activities most closely associated by recognizing themselves as farmers. So women's roles, by contrast, are more visible in the post-harvest activities and the supportive farm tasks, although that's a critical, significant contribution that is still considered as a supportive task. So this finding is from Cabinton, which is from Leite, and is an important contradiction where you could see women actively participating in all the farm labor activities, yet they have very limited control over the decisions, and particularly in those that determine access to technologies, inputs, and income. So this imbalance contributes directly to the women's institutional invisibility, reinforcing their exclusion from the different policies and also the access to land ownership as well. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So there's more from the report, which is talking about the decision making and the task performance. And this slide reveals an important contrast between perception and practice in farm decision making, highlighting how gender roles are both contested and constrained in the farming household. From the perspective of female respondents, women are more involved in the decision making than is often acknowledged. For example, 37% of women reported that they alone decide what crop to plant, and 34.2% indicated that women alone make decisions on technology adoption and feeding animals. However, despite these self-reported gains, the overall trend still shows that the farm decisions are largely perceived, especially by men, to be male-dominated, and this perception gap points to an important dynamic. There's women's decision-making roles may exist, but they're often less visible and less formal and less publicly recognized. So when we look at the actual performance of the farming tasks, a strong gender division of labor becomes evident, and men are seen as primarily responsible for physically demanding and technical field operations. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So in this slide, I would like to discuss the average labor hours in the cabbage production as a point of discussion for the activities, in particularly specifically about cabbage production and how males and females spend their hours. And this is a comparison from all the three sites that I was mentioning. So one is from Cabinton or Mock, and then this is Atok, and the other one is from Claveria. This slide presents the average number of labor hours spent per hectare on the cabbage production activities. Across the three sites, cabbage production emerges as a joint effort between men and women, but one characterized by a clear gender division of labor. Overall, the data shows that men generally dedicate more hours to the physically demanding, technically intensive, and the equipment-lighted tasks, which include land preparation, pesticide and herbicide application, fertilizer application using sprayers, and some aspects of harvesting as well. Such activities are often associated with greater visibility, formal recognition, and authority in the farming system, reinforcing the identity of being the primary farmers. However, consequently, the total labor hours were available could be estimated that men's total average hours spent on cabbage production tended to be higher than those of women. And this is more a perception that, and the unpaid household shows that women involved is not included in this data. So if that is being included, then of course, this whole numbers would change and women would be doing more hours compared to men. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I would like to emphasize strategies for recognizing and valuing women's contribution. So recognizing women as farmers is very important. And in the program eligibility, allowing enrollment using alternative proofs, for example, lease, tenancy, cooperative membership, producer group verification, not only formal title, but also household leadership needs to be considered. Just like land rights to services, there should be other alternatives where the women could access to credit and insurance so that women can themselves be recognized as farmers. The second about reducing unpaid domestic and care work burdens, which time is production constraint. Of course, in the research and in other implementation of development work, we do schedule trainings which would suit women and it's convenient for them to participate. However, in recent findings, we definitely think that it's important for having couple trainings so that men value that women is being informed and learned, has got knowledge through the training, and so that that knowledge will be appreciated when discussed within the household for change of any practice that can happen. So that's quite critical. Thirdly, shift household and community decision making. So training turns into adaptation. So this is something that we it was previously mentioned in the FAO, where there is an approach of more a family approach, a whole family approach to trainings and knowledge transfer specifically, and of course in the decision-making process as well. So if we want within the household, the women to be respected, it should start from the male members within the household and also the community members within that particular community, which will be the elderly men and other men as well. That respect and recognition should begin through any of the methods and approaches that we will be trying to implement. And then lastly, make extension and markets work for women. Of course, we again repetitively think about the credibility and access to finance, and also allowing more information access to women, which is about markets, which is price index, and to make those right decisions to bring food on plate. And of course, a joint responsibility is something we would like to establish. So more and more, the recognition that we bring is more and more where we will be able to make advancement in any development. So thanks once again for this great opportunity and look forward to more discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gomati, for your discussion. So we appreciated that you showed us data showing these patterns of invisibility with regard to the work of women, and this just goes to show that there is really a gap that we need to fill in terms of recognizing and giving value to the work that women do. So thank you very much once again, Dr. Gomati. Now let's move on to our last speaker for today. So for our next speaker, she is a former socioeconomist, gender expert at the International Rice Research Institute with nearly 40 years of experience mainstreaming gender in agricultural research, participatory technology development, and capacity building across Asia. Her work explored gender, livelihoods, rural migration, mechanization, climate resilience, and policy. After retirement, she gave a lecture on women and work at the Open University, served as the gender expert for an ADB climate resilience project, and mentored a research team from the University of Southern Mindanao during DipLab's policy research proposal writing program. So currently, she serves as a science and technology consultant for DOST Picard. We are honored to have Dr. Thelma Paris this afternoon. Welcome, Dr. Thelma Paris.
Good afternoon. There's an advantage of being the last speaker. Am I the last speaker?
Yes,
Am I the
ma'am.
last speaker? I've heard
Yes,
very interesting ideas and data from the previous speakers, and I thought, well, my job is done. Actually, I feel that, wait, I got lost. I don't know what I did, but I'm no longer in the Zoom. Okay. 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 Can you operate it?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. So I
We
don't
can operate
see it.
the
Yeah.
presentation.
I cannot see it. Oh, here. Okay. So I feel like I'm going back now to during the 80s, mid 80s, when we started talking about the role of women in agriculture, particularly in rice farming. And at that time, as a young researcher, it was very difficult for me and very challenging to involve scientists and to convince them that women, by talking to women, their technologies will have that women can benefit, or they are the potential beneficiaries and end users of rice technologies. So it was difficult for me, to convince them, because these scientists were only interested in data. So one of the heads of the famous agricultural institute here in the Philippines, when I presented a paper on gender and women in agriculture, he felt that I am very emotional. Despite the data that I presented, he quietly slipped the paper after showing all the evidences of labor use in India by caste, by crop operation. Still, I got this comment saying that I was emotional. So that, of course, discouraged me from doing this work. But on the other hand, I thought, when my other colleague, scientists, said, we were then talking, the conference then was an international conference for stress, on developing technologies for stress environment. And I was working there in Eastern India, the most difficult environment in India. And I felt like I was an outsider because I don't gender. Why would they be interested in gender? And all of them were talking about craft physiology and all that. And then my other colleague said, Thelma, who suffers more or most when the plant gets stressed? Because the women in India, the lower caste, they transplant. They have to wait for a long time to transplant the seedlings. And then the seedlings get over that are already dried up, and so they were the ones who are affected by the stress and environment because of this unpaid labor. And most of these women are unpaid because they are the poorest of the poor. Next. So those were my. Should I operate it or you operate it? Can you change the? Okay. So in this presentation, I will be more of them doing what we have done and to measure unpaid labor, and what I am doing now in terms of addressing these issues on gender gaps in participation, for example, in cooperatives and all that, because fortunately, I'm also part of a big project funded by ADB, and that is the AMIA project, the Adaptation and Mitigation Initiative for climate resilience, and that is in collaboration with DA. And in that big project, we're doing many activities which will directly benefit women. So my objective for this presentation is to assess what are the gender gaps in the Philippine agriculture statistics and why making unpaid labor in agriculture matters. Why are we so much concerned? And the previous presenters already gave their ideas, their results of their studies on why it matters. To understand women's unpaid labor in agriculture and explain why it is invisible in the statistics. Identify tools of measuring women's unpaid labor contributions and recommend policy solutions. As I mentioned, being emotional is not enough, being counting and so forth. We need, in Erie, for example, my experience was that as a young researcher, to show evidence, to show that women indeed contribute in rice, and therefore any technologies which they develop will affect them positively or negatively, whether it is a new variety or a new machinery, a transplanter, or developing or IPM and other technologies which are done, these activities like transplanting, weeding, and although harvesting and other activities are done by unpaid female members of the family. So here the statistics, the statistics say that women comprise only 24 to 25% of the agriculture workforce. But when you go to the field, you see that women are doing most of the work, particularly during the peak season. So there must be something wrong, something wrong with the data, or we don't really know how they got those numbers. And when you talk agriculture, it encompasses crops, many different crops, livestock, agroforestry, aquaculture, and all that. So I don't really know where they got these numbers. Male-female workers still dominate employment. Many women are classified as unpaid family workers, and fewer women are recognized as farmers, as discussed earlier. And there is a gap between the wages between men and women. So the key message is that women are not or invisible in the statistics. So we have to do something to make them visible. So these case studies or other activities that we do to make women visible should also be shown in the statistics, because our policymakers, scientists are more interested in evidence. So the failure to classify and enumerate family labor adequately is one of the main reasons for the failure of official figures. So to share next, to what is unpaid labor, and we all know that this most of the female family members, particularly from small farm holders and marginalized farming households, provide unpaid labor. In fact, there are arrangements wherein the women provide free labor as long as they have the guarantee that they will be the ones to harvest the crop, rice. So there are some labor arrangements between in these very villages, and also the exchange labor, that is again no cash but exchanging labor, is also still practiced in many of these poor communities as a strategy in whenever they don't have any cash income. So family labor, including exchange, domestic and care work, post-harvest, and we have heard of the triple burden of women because they have to combine all these tasks, including care work. Now, next, please. So women, we only focus, or scientists focus only the agricultural aspect in any crop, ignoring or they don't give much attention in the other operations in the value chain, for example, in processing. Because as we know, the participation of women, particularly the hard laborers, female hard laborers, is declining because of the influx of machinery, agricultural machinery. So we have to know who are affected by this agricultural mechanization. Are the women, female family members benefiting from this machinery, which reduce their drudgery, or the hard laborers whose income from doing transplanting or weeding work or harvesting are very important to their families? So these are the activities that women do. Next. And give more. So, but we need to be pay more attention that when we say women are engaged in agriculture, or women do not have access to capital and all that, it is, and we should not generalize, as we heard from Undersec Lopez, that this culture, these differences also matter. For example, in what we do is always look into the context, and we also look into the farming systems. And we have some, because women's gender roles are dynamic, they change. For example, and women's labor and decision making roles vary based on the differences in the type of landscape, upland, rainfed, and irrigated, level of poverty, level of market orientation, male out-migration, level of mechanization, and economic status. And most of our research have dealt with this. For example, I have done a study on the impact of male out-migration on women, female members of the family, and we found out that we could always consider women as only helpers, and the main farmer is the man, but women are increasingly becoming de facto household head of households and also managers of their farms. And these are invisible responsibilities which should be taken into account by those who introduce technologies. We need to draw patterns to draw conclusions. For example, in our study, in female family labor contributions are higher in unfavorable uplands and subsistence farming than in the lowland irrigated rice farming. And this is easy to understand because poverty is pervasive in the unfavorable rain-fed conditions in the uplands. And therefore, the women spend more time rather than hiring labor. Female family labor or contribution declines with labor-saving technologies like direct seeding, transplanter, combined harvest, and so forth. So our studies also deal with the impact of technologies on men and women, whether they are members of the family or hard laborers, because we don't only look into efficiency, but also equity. Next. So why does it matter to measure unpaid work? As I discussed earlier, women are key to food security, and they are also responsible or critical for household nutrition and essential for climate resilience. Next. So why is it that for many years, the unpaid labor is still invisible, even though they are visible in the farm, And Dr. Helia Castillo, I would like to quote, saying that the women are invisible even to those who see them. So that means even though they see them doing the work, they still see this, they don't even see these women. And I experienced that because in one of my trips with scientists, area scientists, we went to the field to look into the direct seeding of rice. And then he saw a good stand of rice, very healthy. And then when he stood there and he asked the farmer, I'd like to talk to the farmer, with his sons. I like to talk to the farmer. And then the woman who's really was the farmer was standing there and she said, repeating, I am the farmer. I am the farmer, But this scientist has this is very blind, that the lady is already in front of him and he still doesn't want to know or to understand why this woman can produce such healthy rice plants. So that was to me a eye opener, because indeed, scientists are not are still looking for the male farmers. So they focus on the male head, and this is also our fault. No, for example, I started as an economist, and we were trained to do surveys. And the first thing that we do is to develop questionnaires without even going to the field. And the first instruction is to look for the head of household and talk to the male farmer. So that we did. And we never asked the women because that was the instruction. But all we got was that. So automatically, the women are not there, because the women are just housewives. Then I threw the questionnaire and I thought, no, there's something wrong with the way we ask. So I changed the way we asked the question. Then I talked to the wife of the farmer. Do you transplant? Yes, check. Do you weed? Yes. Do you visit the field? Yes. Do you harvest? Yes. So you are a housewife? Yes. And then the husband said, yeah, she doesn't know anything about farming, And then when he asked the question, how much is your fertilizer? Oh, then he faced his wife, said, how much is the fertilizer? How many workers did we pay? Then he turned again to the wife. So, it's actually our perception. So also it's our fault because we have these wrong perceptions that we change because we did a lot of field work. So the narrow definition of work, because taking care of pigs is just an extension of household task, because after preparing the food, then they feed the animals, and the income from the pig production is used for the enrollment of the children. And that income is lost, even for processing and all that. And also it is important for us to know when the women do the task. Is it during the wet season or the dry season? So time is poorly captured, and lack of sex disaggregated data. Next. Next. So as a researcher, I also learned, a lot and changing my perceptions. So we focus on the male head of the farmer as the principal income earner. And as I said, because the men go out for off-farm and non-farm income, the women also manage the farm without even being recognized as the main farmer. And the other members of the family go out, leaving the women with triple burden. Next. So what we did with that, finding out that the women are becoming the de facto farm managers, then we directly went to them, and then we included them in the meetings, and we provided them, we organized them as our target beneficiaries, and did a pre-test and post-test analysis of what they know about crop management. So that is the lesson that we learned, that when we want to know who is doing what and who are the potential adapters of a technology, we have to include women, but not to exclude the men. So next. So the definition of work is not only doing the physical work, but other work activities like seed selection is not included, feeding the livestock and other post-harvesting processing. So this we have to include as work, especially if women, particularly in the marginal areas, have to walk longer hours to just get water for family consumption and for on irrigating the fields and so forth. Next. So these household duties, we need to also categorize which are unpaid or which contribute to the family income. So this perception that unpaid work of women are extension of household tasks need to be changed, because taking care of livestock, feeding the animals, and taking care of chickens and so forth are still part of agriculture, or taking care of fish within the backyard, as which is a practice in Bangladesh and so forth. In India, the practice is to grow vegetables for home consumption. Next. And because of this invisibility, automatically they are excluded by agriculture extension workers. Parang bura na sila kasi they are not, there is no way to include them. I mean, they will not benefit from any technologies that they will introduce, because they're only doing domestic work. So non-market production is undervalued. And there are also many strategies in the village. Sometimes you wonder how they survive with, especially those in the areas who are who are subsistence oriented, because most of their economy are informal, and also they take care of chickens and all that, and then they sell. So you don't really take account of the income, and also they have expenditure saving, like, for example, working for other people, exchange and all that. So those are hidden ways of survival in the village. Next. But these are all critical for food security and nutrition. Time use is poorly captured because we assume we only take data for one time, but there is a seasonality. Women's work is seasonal, intermittent, multitask. And one of the reasons they get lower wages is merely because they start early in the morning and they stop because they have to fetch their children from the school and then come back after lunch. And so they are branded as lazy. But it is very difficult for the women to juggle the time between doing farming and also their childcare and household responsibilities. So those are intermittent compared to men. Men just work the whole day and multitask. That's why we have this triple burden. And traditional surveys use recall method and do not actually measure. Next. Next. So another reason is that there is lack of sex disaggregated. They don't exist, because even economists don't like to collect data. They just lump the data into labor. That's all. They don't even look into family and hired and even other sources of labor. So they said that it's too much, it's too difficult to collect. Next. So what we did is to collect data, unpaid labor of family members and hard labor to show, of male and female, to show how much these members contribute to total labor hours in rice production per hectare. So invisible labor leads to underestimation of women's economic contribution. They are not just housewives, they earn, but we need to estimate or compute. For example, how much income do they get from processing or converting rice into rice delicacies? We did that. How much income do they get, or how much time do they spend in feeding the pigs? We did that. We calculated their labor cost, or they imputed the value of the labor and told them that this is how much you save the income saved by taking care of small animals. Next. So they feel more important because they know that they contributed to the family income. So next. So how does ignoring unpaid work impact global food systems? And we say that this invisibility hinders effort to build more equitable and resilient food systems. But in reality, the women have many strategies in adapting to climate change. For example, they have these anticipatory strategies like keeping food which are unperishable. In India, they collect cow dung cakes, this fuel for the animals. They collect. They are preparing for this dry months, dry season, and also for the rainy days. So these are hidden, are sort of not recognized as strategies of women in coping with these climate disasters. Climate change, economic shocks, and global pandemics disproportionately impact vulnerable agricultural commodities, many of whom rely heavily on unpaid family. And this was again discussed earlier in this program, in this event. Next. So we need to recognize this unpaid labor, but the question is, how do we measure? You know, I have witnessed many researchers, they collect too much data on time allocation, but they don't know how to use it. You know, I don't know what, it doesn't make sense. You just collect, the women do this, they do that. So we measure, but we know what these data are for. What do we want to know? For example, if I am an agricultural engineer in a team, then I would like to know how much labor is used by a woman in just planting rice so that I can develop a lightweight or equipment which can reduce the drudgery, increase efficiency, and save her time. So what kind of data do you get? It's only the time that she spends in transplanting and the time that also she does, because it is a detriment if she says, oh, I cannot do this work or adapt this technology because I don't have time. No? So you also have to examine what are the constraints in adapting the technology. So labor use participation in not only in agriculture, but in crop, small livestock, fisheries, and so forth. 24-hour recall for husband and wife, but these are specific to what we want to know. Labor diaries, focus group discussions, and the most important is imputing the value of labor using the market labor rates. Next. So these are the sample indicators. For example, you just don't say that women are engaged in agriculture. We have to know, draw patterns or compare. Which women are we talking about? How about the women in Cordillera? How about the women in Central Luzon? Irrigated. Then if we go there and we say, oh, the women are no longer working the farm, then you make generalize. You say, well, women in the Philippines don't work anymore. So that's a generalization. But if we go to different places and then we examine what are the patterns, for example, if one place is highly mechanized, so we expect that women are no longer in harvesting and threshing activities, and therefore they are engaged in other activities within the agricultural food chain. So time spent in production, reproductive, and community engagement are indicators to show whether these are constraints in accepting or adopting specific technology and participation in decision making. Next, and access to resource. So this is what we do, very simplified, but we have analyzed, we identify the operations, activities in the farm according to the size of the farm, and we convert that into hectares. Family labor, we disaggregate male and female. Exchange, if they do this, still this is traditional labor arrangement. Male and female, hard labor, total. And then we divide this we collect the total labor hours, and then we divide by the area to get the per hectare. by doing this, we are able to compare these labor hours by size of farm, by caste, by different social groups, by degree of market orientation, by level of mechanization, and so forth. Next. So I do two ways to measure, because they always say, well, how do we make this unpaid labor visible to scientists or to policymakers if we don't have the data? So here we have the opportunity cost method. It is getting the value of unpaid labor hours and also the market wage, and this reflects individual opportunity cost. So if a poor female member works on her field 5 days in a week, and you convert that and you multiply the labor hours to the market wage, you will see that her contribution is enormous. It is like a savings. It is not a cost, but saving to the family. So when you show this to the scientists, to the development, you say this, you see how important this woman is? So she doesn't need to be ignored, and she should not suffer from this domestic violence because she contributes to the family income, even though her participation is unpaid. So because we compute for the opportunity cost. Next. And this is another method, is replacement cost method. We value the unpaid labor at the cost to hire someone to do the same tasks. For example, I will not call housewife, I'm not saying, but I'm retired. But if I tell my helper not to come because I will do the housework, so that means I save so much money because I did not hire her. So that should be in my savings account. Next. Next. So we have so many recommendations. One is gender-sensitive extension services, to be able to reach more women, to invite them in demonstration trials, particularly on new technologies, and also for increasing their technical knowledge, which is very important. And women-focused training and credit, community awareness campaigns. So in our project, wherein I'm involved in AMIA project, many women now are members of the agricultural cooperatives. So we don't want to keep on hearing this phrase that women don't have access to credit and all that. In fact, they are recipients of many agriculture micro-lending or microcredit loans. But the problem is that they also pay, for the family. Not the problem, but they are also altruistic, so they pay for the family motorcycle and so forth. Next. And they bear the brunt of paying the loans. So policy recommendation, this will be discussed later. We should consider unpaid labor in planning, integrate gender in not only in production, but in agri enterprises, promoting increasing their knowledge and skills in processing, because they are no longer in the production activities. Empower women as decision makers. Next. So there needs to be a paradigm shift. So to be able to look or remove our sort of traditional perceptions, or that men, are the only farmers, to move beyond narrow economic focus. And we know that we also, in understanding our agriculture work, in introducing technologies like engineering equipment and so forth, we should be able to influence our team in looking not only the technical aspect, but also the social, cultural, and ecological dimensions. So this calls for an interdisciplinary approach and participatory action research, because we don't need economists only. We need sociologists, anthropologists, and gender experts, and environmental science. This may be difficult, but then it works in many of these institutions, because we should not only consider the production, but the entire food system. So I will finish my presentation because I want to give more time for discussions. I did not show any of the data, and I have so many stories to share, but I don't think the time is enough because through the years, I've learned, and now I feel there are times when I am discouraged because there is sort of no change. But now when I joined the project funded by ADB, the AMIA, I feel better because now I see hope, especially for the women, because there are more women now involved in decisions in agricultural cooperatives. They are engaged in livelihood activities like vermiculture, also the use the composting and so forth, and also other livelihood activities. So there is hope that the women's income will increase and that their contributions will be reflected in the economic activities are reflected in the GNP, because it's just let us keep on counting. Let us spend a lot of time providing evidences to policymakers, because without it, they will always say, you are just being emotional. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paris, for that wonderful discussion. So for us, it's a good challenge for us researchers that we could be doing the work in terms of addressing issues of unpaid labor in women. So thank you very much for also presenting the methods and recommendations and the indicators that we could use in our future work. So thank you very much once again to our esteemed speakers, Dr. Gumati, Dr. Telma, and Yusek Janet, for your insights today. I'm sure our viewers are also very inspired and eager to learn more about the topic. So just a quick reminder for our viewers in Facebook and Zoom, you can type in your questions on the comment box, and then later on, we will address them during the open forum. All right, so can we move on to the next session, which is the discussion from the panel of reactors? Let me just introduce our moderator for this session. So she is a lawyer, educator, and gender advocate dedicated to advancing the rights and protection of women and children. She currently serves as University Legal Counsel at the UP Mindanao, where she also acts as Special Counsel on Protection Against Sexual Abuse and Discrimination under the Integrated Gender and Development Office. Let's all welcome Attorney Charmaine P. Valentin. Welcome, Attorney Charmaine.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. So she will be joined by a panel of reactors, starting with Dr. Mansour Limba, a Bangsamoro public intellectual, author, translator, and an associate professor at Ateneo de Davao University. Good afternoon, Dr. Limba.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so the second one is Miss Princess Alma Ani, an agricultural economist with over 2 decades of experience in socioeconomic research, monitoring and evaluation, and policy analysis in the AANR sector. She currently serves as a supervising science research specialist at DOST Picard. Good afternoon, Miss Ani.
Good afternoon. Hi.
Good afternoon. Okay, so for our last panel reactor is Ms. Sheila May B. Almasa, licensed environmental planner and seasoned development advocate. She is currently a Development Management Officer 3 at the Policy Formulation Division at MINDA. Good afternoon, Ms. Almasa.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so we can start the session, Attorney Valentin.
Yes, once again, good afternoon. And I think a while ago, we were able to listen to distinguished speakers, especially in relation to the topic. And I am honored to be joined in the panelists with us, or the reactors from the different fields, from development, policy development, from the development world, academe, and intellectuals. So I would like to ask our esteemed panel reactors for their key takeaways or reflections after hearing our discussants or speakers. Before we proceed with, well, we would like to engage our panel reactors and or also our speakers to deeper conversation in relation to the subject matter on invisible hands, the unseen work behind AANR. So we would like to ask Dr. Limba, Miss Annie, and also Miss Almasa for your reflections, having heard the discussion or the comprehensive discussion being made by our previous speakers. Please go ahead. Would you like to start, Dr. Limba?
I think we would still observe the universal protocol. We say ladies first.
All right. Okay. So could you please go ahead, Miss Annie and Miss Almasa? Thank you for that, Dr. Limba. Especially today, this month is Women's Month. So Dr. Limba would like to give the floor to our ladies.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Limba. No? First, I would like to, of course, thank Deep Love and God Love for this opportunity to serve as one of the panel members to this very important and relevant webinar. So while I am tasked to provide reactions to the individual papers, I think you can observe that each paper is quite reinforcing one another. So probably it's more fitting for me to provide at least and combine key takeaways from all the presentations. So first of all, congratulations to all the presenters, our esteemed presenters, for giving us a very insightful views on the gender gaps in labor participation, especially for women in the agriculture, aquatic, and natural resources sector. So I would start by saying that all presentations provided a concise view of how women's labor participation is systematically and systemically undervalued and recognized and often invisible. In all presentations, probably what stands out the most is that women are not only active participants in farming activities, but also carry the primary responsibility for unpaid domestic and care work. So these dual responsibilities or activities may appear less engaged in formal or paid agricultural labor, but they actually sustain both the productive and reproductive household sides of our rural economies. And I would like to emphasize that the workload of women is much heavier than what is documented and what is fully captured in traditional labor statistics. Further, another probably striking point in all the presentations is that there's a mismatch between contribution and recognition. So as you can see, and we have heard about Dr. Palanyapan's case on vegetable production in Cabintan or Moclete, where she emphasized that women are involved in decision-making and farm operations. However, men are still perceived to be the primary decision makers, especially in technical and financial matters. So the latter on men being primarily deciding on financial matters might be contrary to what we believe in our Philippine context, that women hold the budget in the household. While Yusek Lopez earlier emphasized that women might be the first to feel the impact of the current crisis worldwide, because given the role of women as the household manager of funds. While we believe that women is the primary fund managers of the household, there are cases that prove otherwise, as mentioned by Dr. Palanyapan earlier. So I think it is worth further examining women's roles in terms of control and decision-making related to probably purchases and use of inputs, which could have implications to crop nutrient management and productivity. So I think a critical question that we need to think about is, do women really have both access and control over financial resources? The mismatch of this contribution and recognition probably is further emphasized by Dr. Lopez's point on family labor paradox. If you remember the picture or diagram she showed earlier on the family labor paradox, I would like to emphasize on this paradox using the Psikolohiyang Pilipino or the Philippine psychology paradigm. The Psikolohiyang Pilipino views the family paradox as a manifestation of the Filipinos' deep commitment to family and community, where personal desires or wants are subordinate to the collective family or community well-being. So this has formed part of our culture and norms. So it's already ingrained in our norms and our culture, making women's labor contribution in agriculture a part of her willingness and nurturing nature. Hence, therefore, is called and usually termed as labor out of love for the family. Hence, these are usually unvalued, unrecognized, and invisible. And Dr. Paris' presentation pointed out that unpaid work for women are considered as an extension of their domestic roles and are not part of agriculture. So I think it has to be emphasized that this is already part of our norms and culture, but we have to rethink on how we could probably transform and make contribution in transforming from this culture and norm to a more gender responsive view of the contribution of women in of labor of women in agriculture. So similarly, the presentations also highlighted women's limited access to land ownership, which further reinforces their marginalization in terms of their restriction to access to agricultural support services in general. These would have create a cycle of women continuously contributing significantly, but then remain excluded in most of the benefits or authorities associated with agriculture. Gomati earlier mentioned about globally there's a seemingly exclusion of women because of their titles or the lands are not made under the names of women. So coming up from the Philippine context, when we look at the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, which is predominantly awarded to men, and I would like to update the statistics that in 2023, the Philippine Statistics Authority recorded that the total emancipation patent and the Certificate of Land Ownership Award or CLOA given to women represented only 19% and 31% of the total qualified beneficiaries. So this would mean around a quarter of those beneficiaries are women. And given the current access to the RSBSA, the Register System for Basic Sectors in Agriculture, that would require land titles to be able to be called farmer and be able to access these benefits from agricultural systems, then there will only be around 31% at most of women that can be able to access this support system because they are the one, only 31% of the total beneficiaries are women, and then the land are named after them. And if you would notice, RSBSA requires land titles to be able to access for these benefits. So you see there's an automatic exclusion for those without titles or agreements. And taking off from those key takeaways from the presentations, coming off from a perspective of a monitoring agency, the R&D monitoring agency, PICARD, Probably I would like to put emphasis on what are the key roles or crucial roles of R&D in terms of making women's labor contribution more visible. And then I would be taking off also and probably incorporating some of the takeaways or recommendation made by our presenters. So first, R&D can help make women's labor more visible by improving data collection methods, as mentioned by Dr. Paris earlier, such as time use surveys and sex disaggregated data, which capture both paid and unpaid work. Yusek Lopez earlier mentioned count the unseen and then integrate the characteristics. Dr. Paris also mentioned that we have to integrate the characteristics of women's work, which is seasonal, intermittent, and multitask in capturing data. Without accurate data, women's contributions will continue to be underestimated in policy and planning. Hence, we can change research structures in accounting women's labor and production contribution. Probably more than the labor contribution, we should also take a look into the contribution of women in production, which is also invisible and not accounted for in our gross domestic product. Second, R&D can possibly drive the development of gender-responsive technologies and innovations. For example, as mentioned earlier, labor-saving tools, improved post-harvest equipment, and accessible farming technologies that can reduce women's time burden and increase their productivity. Importantly, these innovations must be designed with women's realities. What are their current situations in considering their time constraints, their mobility, and their multiple roles so as to avoid further burdening them. If you remember Dr. Palanyapan's recommendation earlier that the key strategies, technologies, and extension services should reduce unpaid and care work burdens. Third, on inclusive and agricultural policies and programs, we should actually examine barriers such as land ownership, as I have mentioned earlier. Land ownership as a prerequisite to be recognized as a farmer under RSBSA and be able to access benefits and support services of the various programs, especially of the Department of Agriculture. I think we have to re-examine these prerequisites to be able to be more gender responsive and equitable, and assess this necessary requirement to be considered as farmer beyond land types. And probably fourth, in terms of participation to community-based research approaches, we can possibly elevate women's voices and their recognition by not just as a beneficiary, but as a co-producer of knowledge. You see farmers, especially women, are great knowledge holders and innovators in agriculture. And them being seen as co-producers, not only as beneficiaries, could actually change the structure in terms of how we view women as part of agriculture. So I think it's high time to include in our narratives the best practices of mainstreaming gender and how women are able to transform and change norms. So if I'd like to emphasize Dr. Paris' narratives earlier that she's now happy seeing women being involved in cooperatives, leading agri-entrepreneurs. So I think narratives now can be changed in terms of how we view best practices of these women farmers. So what have been done already to make women's contribution visible, establish the evidences? And I think more than the economics, where improvement in income is our foremost indicator, let us re-examine gender as a social and cultural context that is intertwined in varying environmental circumstances as well. This has affect how women and men interact and make agricultural decisions. I think let us be reminded that gender and development initiatives are relational by nature. So hence, these involve both women and men's participation. Um, Lastly, I would like to say that Picard is continuously and strongly supporting gender responsive R&D by strengthening gender research platforms, expanding gender analysis in value chains, developing gender responsive innovation systems, and supporting gender informed policy development. So I think that's all I can say for the presenters. Again, thank you and congratulations to all.
All right. Thank you very much, Miss Annie, for that comprehensive reflection and key takeaways. And I'm sure you were able to intertwine the insights of the three presenters and provide additional input, especially as to how Picard can be can really reduce the gender gap. And as you've mentioned, there are key points that Picard is doing right now as a research and development and also monitoring institution. Thank you very much for that, Miss Annie. Could we hear from Miss Almasa? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to the organizers and resource speakers for convening this timely and high relevant dialogue for gender and development in agriculture, aquatic, and natural resources sector. Am I audible enough?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The discussions were both intellectually grounding and operationally significant for those of us working in the policy planning and development institution. Coming from my early engagement in the NGO work, one of the foundational learnings that continues to shape my perspective in the distinction between the productive and the reproductive spheres of labor is that they are before treated as separate domains and now clearly understood as interconnected system that we should recognize. Wherein productive labor sustains productive work, yet remains least recognized in economic and policy systems. And this lens is essential in understanding today's discussion for women's unpaid and invisible labor in the agriculture. And I'm so thankful for those insights. It's very refreshing since it's more evidence-based. And like Dr. Talma said, na it's not anymore emotionally based discussions. So with that, my takeaways for the different presentations would be from Dr. Lopez' perspective is that it underscores the women's agriculture in economically active but statistically invisible, largely due to the systemic design issues in data systems, targeting mechanisms, and labor classifications. And their unpaid family labor, informal work, and household economic contributions remain unrecognized still, resulting to limited access to resources and decision-making spaces. And from Dr. Gumati's presentation, it somehow lingers in my thoughts on the persistent issue on the time poverty and dual burden, wherein women simultaneously manage productive work, farm work, and unpaid care responsibilities, despite their active participation in the agriculture values chains. From the seed production to the post-harvest activities, women remain constrained by limited access to land, credit, and markets, which is a really sad fact until today. From Dr. Thomas Parry's discussion, it exposes the statistical and institutional invisibility of women, despite the constituting a significant portion of the agricultural workforce. Women are often misclassified as household helpers with wage disparities and uncounting reinforcement structural inequality. So among these presentations, there are common thread emerging that women contributions are foundational to the AANR sector, yet remain unvalued due to the gaps in measurement, recognition, and policy design. This invisibility is not only a gender concern, but a development constraint that affects productivity, equity, and resilience in the Mindanao rural economy. From the perspective of the Mindanao Development Authority, this reinforces our strong advocacy for evidence-based and decision-making and policy formulation, where data, research, and lived realities must guide planning and investment programming. This is critical in the policy-relevant information that is made accessible to all sectors to ensure a responsive and inclusive development outcome. So from the perspective of the policy research standpoint, these insights underscore the importance of strengthening our knowledge systems and multiplying ourselves as policy researchers, particularly in this sector. The complexity of gendered cultural systems required a larger and more capacitated community of researchers who can translate evidence into actionable policy. In this regard, if I may allowed to share my 3 slides summary points wherein my fellow policy research out there could note and perhaps have a glimpse of what the other issues they could answer based on their researches.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, I'll go directly to the consolidated policy recommendations for advocacy that I have noted based on the 3 presentations. So these are the data measure and statistical reform. Second is the labor recognition and targeting systems. Third is the access for productive resources. 4 is the time poverty and care economic interventions. 5 is value chain inclusion and enterprise development. 6 is gender responsive infrastructure services. 7 is institutional reform and governance. 8 is leadership and participation. Perhaps if I'll be able to provide details of this, I'll just give to the organizer for reference to be shared to all those interested participants. With this, to align all perspective in terms of our advocacy and ensuring that all Mindanaoans will not be left behind, we are hoping to align all those policy recommendations to the Mindanao Agenda pillars that we have enclosed in this matrix. And perhaps this could be used by the different policy researchers like me to help us provide solutions to the issues and concerns, especially raised early through the different resource persons that they shared their perspective with. And this, to wrap up my perspective, it is really resounding to note that women in the agriculture are economically active but statistically invisible. Ultimately, transforming this sector requires a paradigm shift from viewing women as mere participants and giving them focus as central economic actors whose labor sustain economic development and even improvement. Through evidence-based policy, we're hoping that this platform will help us have papers that would really provide evidences or reference for decision making and policy making to help Mindanao move towards a more productive and resilient development pathway. So through this policy hackathon, plus the collaboration of different sectors, perhaps we can make this shift possible. Advocacy in this sector and Mindanao's development. So with that, thank you po.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Almasa. It is great to know that, especially with Minda, you've mentioned that we need data-driven and evidence-driven researches for us to ensure that this will well, we could be able to develop policies and programs and a provided challenge to your fellow policy advocates. All right. So with that, and I think it is good to note that Minda, with its Mindanao agenda, are already doing the part, right? Am I correct, Miss Almasa? So we
Yes.
are now,
But
yes, and it
we're
is good
more
to know.
on hoping to have more solutions to those issues and concerns that we already documented. So with the
All
help
right.
of the academic community and the other stakeholders, perhaps collaboration would be a key.
Yes, and indeed, this is one of the this is one of the venue where we can collaborate and continue the discussion and also the policy hackathon. All right. Yes. So with that, the last but not the least, could we hear from you, Dr. Limba, please?
Thank you so much, Attorney Charmaine and my fellow reactors. So first, I would say Salamun Alaikum and good afternoon to all of you. So at the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for this invitation and by extension, opportunity for me to share my thoughts and insights as well as reflections on the subject at hand. Actually, I like very much the title Invisible Hands. No, if we would add, we could say also Invisible Hands and Untold Stories. So, of course, particular thanks to Miss Mitch or Michiko, my colleague and classmate way back in college. Of course, just a few semesters ago. For, as you would observe, for making me the only thorn among the roses of the presenters, reactors, moderator, the and even the host as well as the other speakers or those who gave messages before and even after. So thank you, Miss Mitch, for making me the third. It is not a usual experience for me to be speaking related to this subject at this important month, which is Women's Month. So we are also grateful to our presenters, Yusek Lopez, Dr. Palanyapan, and Dr. Paris for the informative and insightful presentations. So for this webinar, please allow me to react from the vantage point of the Bangsamoro, where what we call the invisible hand is not actually abstract. It has faces, it has names, even shadows and legs. I am referring to the mother in the rice field, the daughter in the fish pond, for example, or in the Ligawasan Marsh, the widow holding together a household after a conflict. So listening to our three speakers, I see a three common thread. One is recognition, second is valuation, and of course, our main purpose is policy inclusion of women's labor in the AANR sector. But for the BARM perspective, actually the issue is deeper. It is not just about recognition. It is about legitimacy. Much of women's labor in our communities is not just unpaid. Rather, it is expected. And since it is expected, it is embedded in family obligation, in what we call as amana or trust. And because it is expected, it is often not counted, as in other cultural traditions also, including our Filipino culture, no, in general. And what is not counted definitely is not funded. So this brings me to a key concern. Many of our current frameworks measure productivity, but they fail to capture relational and reproductive labor. the kind of work that sustains not only the household but the entire local economy. Now, at the same time, we must be careful because in BARM, gender gaps intersect with poverty, post-conflict realities, and cultural norms. Hindi mawawala yan. Not all gender roles are automatically oppressive because some are negotiated, some are protective. So the challenge is this: how do we pursue gender justice without becoming culturally alienating? So striking a balance between the two. Perhaps the answer lies in what we call contextual gender justice, policies that are both transformative and locally grounded. So from a governance perspective, this invisibility we are talking about is also about data problem, as also indicated implicitly or explicitly by our three distinguished presenters. If women's contribution are absent in our data sets, they will remain absent in our budgets and programs. So I would humbly propose three directions, or what we call as takeaways. First is for us to develop culturally sensitive indicators of family labor in the AANR sector. The second is, as also mentioned in at least one or two of the presenters, to institutionalize gender disaggregated data at the barangay level. For example, when we record the number of participants in a certain capacity building seminar, let us not just put 100 participants successfully undergone, they have undergone this and that. We have to indicate the gender. For example, 70 women, 60 men, and then 40 women, for example. And the third is to ensure that recognition will not stop there, but rather to go beyond that, to go beyond resource allocation and representation. Resource allocation and representation, because at the end of the day, family labor is never auxiliary. They are foundational in our economy. So let me end this with the following points. If policy only sees what is visible, it will always be unjust. And when policy learns to see the unseen, that is when governance becomes truly humane. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc Limba. And it is good to note that you've added to the conversation, especially when you've mentioned about contextual gender justice. All right, that you should always emphasize, and all of this similar to what Ma'am Annie said a while ago about Psikolohiyang Filipino, that there's always all of this could always be in the context of our social norms and culture as well. So it is really indeed a challenge for us to create evidence-based research, contextualized, and also have this conversation linked for policymaking advocacies, and have it for specific projects and programs that would really address and recognize the invisible hands and the invisible work of women in aquaculture, agriculture, and natural resources. All right. So I think for my last question, thank you very much for that reflections and your key takeaways. And I believe so with your respective field and expertise, we're able to add to the discussion, to the conversation, as well as really provide action points and responses to the challenge being flooded by our great speakers. For But I would like to ask also our panelists pertaining to, there was a mention about during the the discussion of the speakers or their presentation about technology and digital innovation, especially nowadays. I would like to ask our panelists if how can technology and digital innovation help women's work in AANR sector more visible and valued, especially nowadays with technology, digital innovation, and AI. So this is a continuous challenge for us, especially in this sector. I would like to ask the points of our panelists, especially that we are really from different sectors. So how could this technology, digital innovation, and AI in the field of AANR can help women's work more visible and valued? Your thoughts, please. Who would like to start? Or do you think it would serve as additional challenge?
Maybe I can.
Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
I just like to share with you that when I became can you hear me? Yeah. When I became
Yes, ma'am.
a consultant of the AMIA, there I really was so impressed that before I thought the cooperatives are dying, but with the AMIA, the cooperatives brought a lot of women. In fact, in the board of as a board member, there is one gender specialist, but who doesn't really know what she's doing, But at least there's one token. But we are going to have a training on DSTs because women now are different. Unlike before, they're not empowered. You see now that they are getting to voice their opinions because they are encouraged. They're no longer. We are no longer in that. The fruits of the organizations in empowering women, they're bearing fruits now. So many in these communities that we're working in, the women can just speak what they want to say, and the men also listen to them. So this digital, we call these technologies, these are very useful for as a tool for climate adaptation. In fact, I mentioned in my talk that women have adaptation strategies which men don't use, because they have this anticipatory, they're always anticipate what's going to happen because they know that during this month, and so they prepare because they are concerned that the house should not be destroyed, the pigs and the chickens and all that. So they are now getting into this. It's good that they have this LGUs. They're a good way of giving information, climate information through chat, through cell phone. So they have a committee and all that. So they are very alert in getting timely information for any typhoon and all that. But they still need to know more about other technologies like I don't know about AI, but because they don't have access to internet, those are very difficult. But for the digital, I think there is a potential, as long as the problem is when we do the training, they cannot do that because of their household duties, responsibilities, and all that. So I hope we can do that during the summer when the children are on vacation, and so that they can be more attentive rather than being distracted, because this is not easy. And along with that digital digitization is sort of like that is the financial literacy, because we found out that the women are getting a lot of opportunities, but at the end they didn't really know really how to save, and handle, for example, the income from businesses. How do they compute for the the cost and returns, or benefits from that and all those. So they need those kinds of training. So at this point, when these women are no longer doing the field activities, they are now elevated, or they are now into different levels using this and the capability as managers. And this, of course, will empower them as women, because being manager is getting more systematic way. But then again, you have to, it might have a backlash, because when the women are getting stronger, the men have to learn also how to take care of the household responsibilities. So dapat ganun eh. Otherwise, the burden on women will pile up, diba? Business, cooperatives, lahat na nasa kanila. So they will not have any more time to take care of the children. Baka they might neglect. So it's a balance. But
All
we
right,
are
thank
going
you.
to give that
Yes.
right.
Okay, thank you very much for that sharing, Dr. Telma. And I think there are questions also specifically addressed to our speakers. And for our panelists, thank you very much, Ma'am Annie and Ma'am Almasa. And also, I think we could proceed with the three questions for our panelists. And of course, Dr. Limba, thank you very much for joining us a while ago during the panel discussion. So for our speaker one, for a question for Yusek Lopez, how can advocates use existing peace building or community driven development processes in Mindanao to gradually introduce more inclusive norms in agriculture without triggering strong resistance, especially in areas where the role of women are embedded in the local culture? So I think we got that from the chat for the Q&A part. Yes, Yusek Lopez. Is she still around?
Maybe she left.
All right. Okay.
Attorney, I think
So,
Miss
yes.
Almasa could answer on
Yes.
behalf of Yusek Lopez.
Yes, correct. So, yes, Ma'am Almasa, can you possibly answer the question for Minda? Go ahead, ma'am.
Actually, the policy advocates could push through without triggering strong resistance. If we could provide evidence-based and scientific-based analysis or references wherein our decision and even policy proposals should be anchored on. It's not more on emotional driven, but more on a more concrete and evidence based. And in that way, and that's one of the primary priority and advocacy that Minda is pushing. In that way, we could all together discuss things and prioritize things accordingly to the issues raised and provided in terms of documented context.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Almasa, for that. And for our another speaker, Dr. Palaniapan, how can future research and program design in Philippine agricultural value chains deliberately make women's invisibility the starting point rather than an afterthought? Is she still around also? I think, could we proceed to the, yes, Doc? All right, maybe she'll just answer that later. Okay, for Dr. Paris, our third resource person, women are indeed underrepresented in the AANR sector, yet gender responsive practices already exist despite persistent barriers. In Mindanao, particularly in conflict affected areas, how can these best practices be better documented and scaled up? What context-sensitive interventions may be suggested to address constraints such as limited access to resources, mobility, and security risks? Go ahead, Ma'am Thelma, Doc Pari.
I have been to countries where there are cultural barriers because most of my work are in other parts of Asia and not in the Philippines. For example, in Bangladesh, we cannot just involve women without asking the men. So we found out that we have to ask the guardian. So that means we have to be sensitive to know what we should do rather than imposing our norm values or imposing the sort of like we impose changes which will break down their their tradition and norms, because we don't want to break the family and so forth. So that I think is that we should be able to interweave within the system, find out who should be respected, and once that guardian will be convinced, because we have talked to him, tell him that we are interested, our motives are for we have the good intentions for the family and not only for the women. So by convincing that person, then that means we can go ahead with what we want to do. So that means we should be culturally sensitive. But since I have not been there, so I cannot really give a good opinion. I'm not the person to give that advice, because I've not been in that kind of situation. But I have been also in India, where the caste system is so distinct that I cannot even talk directly to the lower caste when the upper caste women are there. So, but I was able to solve that problem because, for example, these men do not want the women to be involved. But I did something that changed the whole system. Because I have to influence the scientists, the breeder, and the women who are illiterate and no education at all, very traditional and so forth. I introduced the participatory varietal selection, and I use a different way because I know that they into voting. They cannot read, they're no right, but they are into voting. And so I developed the system that they will vote, but separately between men and women. Men in a different, they go through the different varieties of rice, the men do that. But traditionally, the women are not allowed to speak or say anything. But in that exercise, we asked the women who sat separately from men to give opinions on what they saw. What do they think about that variety? Is that variety going to have good yields or what? Because they know they have this indigenous. So that is the way to work with those kinds of maybe I'll say cultural, to break the culture is to be able to change your method, of doing research. Not the use, no questionnaire at all. Observation, doing these games, or I also did a game, participatory game, when I want to know what types of varieties they like for different ecosystems. I asked them to put money where they think has a higher importance. So it's like a game. Games break deeply embedded tradition, because it's fun. So there's so many ways of doing that. Did I answer the question? How to break into those deeply embedded or sort of like closed, barriers which limit women's participation in the public. So those are my experiences. So.
Thank you very much, Dr. Telma, for sharing your experience and how to break the barriers.
Yeah, I also wear my salwar kameez. I am with them. So I'm like an Indian when I go there. I'm a Bangladeshi when I go there. So that's me.
Yes, that's great. And also, always your method should also always, as you've mentioned, it should always be culturally sensitive, as
Yes,
you've
yes.
mentioned.
I mean,
Yes,
participatory, not dictating or not changing the family tradition. Just weave through that, you know.
yes, correct. And we got a lot to hear from you, and we got a lot of learnings. We have a lot of learnings from you, especially with your experience, not only in the Philippines, but also in other countries. All right, I think we also have a question from the
I saw
Q&A, but
to me,
yes.
question to me, what is that? I didn't see it.
All right. Actually, it's not for, I think it is for Yusek Lopus, but she is
Yeah, yeah.
not here. And I think we could just email this to Minda also for further discussion. All right. So with that, we would like to close the panel discussion as well as the open forum. Thank you very much for participating in this conversation. We would
You have
like
a
to
photo?
yes, hear from you. All right. So I would like to make this conversation inspire evidence-based, inclusive, and forward-looking policies for the AANR sector in Mindanao, in the Philippines, and beyond. Thank you very much. I would like to turn over the floor to our host. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much to our moderator, Attorney Valentin, to our panel reactors, Dr. Limba, Miss Annie, and Miss Almasa, and of course to our resource speakers, Dr. Paris, Yusek Lopez, and Dr. Gomati. So now we're just gonna have a very quick awarding of certificates to our resource speakers. So let me just read the citation. Next slide. Okay, so for our resource speakers, to USEC Janet M. Lopez for serving as resource speaker during the webinar entitled Invisible Hands, the Unseen Work Behind AANR, jointly organized by DIPLab, College of Public Affairs and Development, UPLB, and GADLab in AANR, and the Mindanao Development Authority, held on 25th of March 2026, given this 25th day of March 2026 via Zoom webinar. So the CERM certificate will be awarded to Dr. Gomati Palanyapan and of course to Dr. Thelma R. Paris. Thank you very much again to our resource speakers. And then the same certificate to our reactors, Dr. Mansour L. Limba, to Miss Princess Alma B. Ani, and to Miss Sheila May B. Almasa. Thank you very much for your time and expertise. And finally, to our moderator, Attorney Charmaine P. Valentin. All right, so now to formally close our event, I would like to invite the project leader of GADLab in AANR, Miss Michiko Ariola Lopez.
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone who joined us today for this very important conversation on, hold on. So again, thank you everyone who joined us today for this very important conversation on invisible hands, recognizing and valuing unpaid family labor and gender gaps in the ANR sector. This webinar reflects our collective and sustained commitment across UP Mindanao, UPLB, and the Mindanao Development Authority, and all the other agencies, especially those who are present today, to make visible what has long remained overlooked, the critical yet undervalued contributions of women and family labor across diverse agri-aqua systems and landscape. As we move forward, we hope that the insights generated today will not only inform research and policy, but also catalyze concrete action towards strengthening inclusive data systems, advancing gender-responsive value chains, and enabling more equitable governance structures. These efforts are integral to the broader agenda of transforming ANR research and development into a more gender-responsive and evidence-driven ecosystems, supported by institutional platforms we have. We invite all of you to continue engaging with us as we translate these conversations into actionable policy ideas, strengthened partnerships, and sustained capacity building initiatives. Maraming salamat especially to our esteemed experts who served as resource persons and reactors. We also look forward to continuing this momentum of our Policy Hackathon teams this Friday, March 27. Together, let us move beyond recognition towards addressing structural barriers so that what has long been invisible becomes visible, valued, and institutionalized. So again, maraming salamat and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Ms. Michiko. So, to those who joined today's webinar, we will be providing you with e-certificates. So please scan the QR code or go to this link bit.ly/invisiblehandsweb_evaluation. So please note that you will only receive your e-certificates upon completion of the evaluation form. So if you have any concerns, you could email us at diplab.uplb@up.edu.ph. Okay, so the link is also sent here in the group chat or in our Zoom chat. Okay, so and that ends our webinar for today. So thank you very much in behalf of the DipLab team and the GADLab in AANR as well as the MINDA team. We would like to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope we got a lot of insights and learnings from this webinar. Thank you to our speakers and moderators as well as our panel reactors. So this has been Nat. I hope you could also give us a like and follow in our Facebook pages, DipLab and the GADLab in AANR. So let us now sing the UP Naming Mahal.